We have reached that time of year where the leaks have started to appear, the sales therefore have commenced, and the second-hand market is about to explode. But the all-important question is, which big brand driver is going to be the steal for 2026? Guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to a brand new video. Simon here, SAS Golf Academy. And I had the pleasure of going down to the brand new refurbished Replay Golf to pick up the 4 big brand drivers that have been current this year. And if you're new to the channel, welcome, because typically I don't touch these drivers like everyone else does on the embargo date, the release date. I touch them when they're soon to become, well, old hat. And the reason that I like doing that is because I like value. All of this superb technology, R&D, design, which would have been glorified at the very start of the marketing campaign, all of a sudden gets forgotten, yet the technology is still there. The certain drivers are going to suit certain golfers, and the value of them are going to come down, which means good, affordable equipment for you guys. So again, big thank you to Replay Golf for loaning me these drivers. And because price is a big talking point throughout this video, what you should expect to get these drivers for now and potentially going into 2026, it's also therefore a good time to tell you about Replay's Black Friday deal, up to 20% off all of their equipment. And as we'll go through driver for driver, as I was saying to the boys, condition-wise, after the 20% discount, some of these are going for the same amount of money that you would find on eBay. Not to mention with Replay, you've got a 7-day free trial and a whole 1-year guarantee if the thing was to break on you. Let's start with a bang, shall we? And why not go for the most expensive retail driver in this video? However, if you're familiar with the channel, I don't actually mind expensive things. What I mind is expensive things that devalue very quickly. And I rather advise a lot of you to buy the equipment down here after it's kind of crashed rather than up here, because if you choose the wrong shaft or head or whatever it might be down here, we'll just sell it somewhere over here and you haven't lost all that kind of value. Tell you what, I absolutely smoked that one. And one of the big advantages of Titleist drivers in general is the amount of heads that they bring out. And that'll be a talking point as we obviously go through the other 3. However, with the GT series, as much as I like it, they're not quite close enough yet to, let's say, the newer version come out. Titleist has a 2-year cycle, just like Ping. However, it's never Christmas time that they normally release it like the other brands. It's more around July, June. And just like July this year, we had the release of the GT1, so that's now the very forgiving version of the GT range. Oh, a bit toey. And there is an upside to 2-year cycles, which is why I circle back to what I said at the start of this, saying I don't mind expensive equipment. This came at $579, currently secondhand, easily around £400, depending on condition, shaft, head type, etc. And to be honest, until July comes about, probably a bit earlier, I see these prices holding quite well. Meaning if you'd bought, let's say, a GT2 or GT3, last Christmas for around £450, you could have played this whole year with a GT3, GT2, try not to sky it. And let's be honest, come March next year, probably sell it for the same amount of money, meaning you haven't lost anything. You kind of invested £450 into a piece of equipment, but by the time you sell it, you're basically back to square one. Which brings me on to the cheapest model in this list, or what I believe is cheapest model actually in terms of recommended retail price, $529. Yep, just did a quick Google search, that is correct. And I did do a whole other video last week on more underrated brands, cheaper recommended retail price drivers and what their secondhand price is like. So make sure to check that out after this video. However, even though just like Titleist, Ping does have a 2-year cycle, they always love bringing out, let's say, a more advanced version of this. And yes, Titleist does that as well. So the GT1's a very forgiving one. However, I always see that marketed more as like a beginner driver. Whereas the very forgiving version of the Ping driver always gets hyped up. Ping is the most forgiving brand when it comes to driver, and I'll explain the upsides and downsides of that in a minute. But because Ping have this persona of ultimate forgiveness, when they bring out their forgiving version, the Ping K, for example, good job I had some forgiveness there, as that was the worst strike of today. A lot of beginners or new people to the game that might have got fitted for this or just bought it as they read some reviews, panic because all of a sudden their Ping Max driver, that would have been the most forgiving Ping driver in their lineup this year, has now been outdone, out-forgived. And realistically, the question is, should those people be panicking, and which one should you be buying? That was better. Now, when I first saw the Ping G430 10K driver come out, everyone with the G430 Max kind of just, well, put it to one side. It dropped in value quite quickly. And then secondly, when it comes just to easy club to use, something that's very forgiving and traditionally higher spinning than the other brands, a lot of people find that they can hit it, and they can hit it straight, which is a big advantage in this game. However, similar to Titleist, where a brand has a 2-year cycle, maybe it might be a good time to pick up the Max in the new year when the hype for the 10, or let's say the K G440 driver comes out. As I'll show you now of the Ping G430 Max down here on the right-hand side, sales are picked up again. Why? Because majority of people don't need a 10K driver. They don't need that ultra forgiveness and high spin. And number two, Ping make very good drivers for the average golfer, not just the tour player. Hence why every Ping Pro uses the LS model, and virtually every other pro with every other brand that is lower spinning than Ping use the standard head. Okay, this is where it gets a bit spicier as we go into the brands that only have 1-year cycles and the pressure that really puts on the retail side of things. Now, the leaks of the new driver, very much Big Bertha Alpha vibes. Definitely looks mean, definitely looks low spinning, and to be honest, in the past, I've always kind of put Callaway in that lower spin category, which could be deemed good or bad, depending on what golfer you are. However, if you're a slower player or someone that needs ultimate forgiveness, I don't think Callaway really brought anything to the table this year when I compare it to other forgiving heads in the market. That being said, they do a driver head that I think they produce better than anyone else on the market, and for that particular player, this is almost a go-to. You see, when I look at the Elite X, for example, and I see there's an option for adjustability, it means that there isn't this ability to have the CG as far back as possible, because the R&D, the way they've engineered that, means you can take a weight out and put it somewhere else. Whereas if you look at every other, let's say, super forgiving driver, let's just use the G430 10K, for example, the weight is as far back as you possibly can get it. In one of my last videos, when I hailed the Cobra DS Adapt Max K head in terms of what a great 10K driver and what prices you can expect to have that in the second-hand market in the future. Again, you can see the weight so far at the back there, and it just helps launch and spin. Not great for everyone, but great for quite a few of you. Do I think a lot of players that, let's say, at least over 90 miles an hour clubhead speed with their driver would enjoy this, and guys that are over 100 miles an hour that love a low cut fade would really enjoy the triple diamond? Well, of course, this thing sounds phenomenal, just like they all do. The efficiency and ball speed you can get off these things on center hits and off center hits, just like the drivers that have come out for the last 5 years, again, phenomenal. All of that supply of stock that hits the market, and now the new engine of Callaway and TaylorMade, driving the awareness for the new stuff, is always going to affect the second-hand market prices of these. But as I said at the start, that's a great problem for you guys, because again, Replay's got this for $399, so take off the Black Friday, around £300. And just like on eBay, loads of them in fantastic condition. That's the only real advantage of buying these drivers now rather than, let's say, next year, because of course they're going to get cheaper, and of course I'll keep reviewing them when they hit the £250 mark. But this is a great time to find these in the wrapper with a specific shaft that you require. And if you're like me and you tend to miss the fairway left, again, they're all 25 yards left to target there. Well, actually a Callaway Elite Triple Diamond driver, a bit more fade bias to keep that face open. Well, sounds pretty inviting right about now, and picking one of these drivers up for around 300, just over £300, I do think is a good investment, because again, I only have to look at the AI smoke prices and what they're selling for at the moment secondhand, and I do feel now the Elite has very much come down to the bottom of that tier, and then will just gradually fall off over the next year. Which brings me on to the black sheep of our list, and probably the one that you want to hear my thoughts on. And the reason that I call it the black sheep of this list is because TaylorMade haven't got the biggest stable of players, realistically. And when a lot of your pros then decide not to use the newest model, of course that's going to hit headlines. That being said, if you think Rory and Scotty are using drivers anywhere near the same as us, in terms of head or shafts for that matter, you'd very much be wrong. And one of the things I kind of always thought about is that you shouldn't be using what the pros are using. Therefore, if they're not necessarily getting on with it, probably we would. And I've always had this philosophy, because as soon as everyone starts running towards something else, I'm kind of running towards the thing that they're all running away from. And I'm not talking about when this first came out, because everyone ran towards this when it first came out, just like everyone will run towards the QI 4D when that comes out. But if you think in 2025 going into 2026 that any four of these brands could make a bad driver, you'll be mistaken. And at the moment, I feel like the fear factor on this driver is at an all-time high, just like you would have a fear factor in the stock market. And typically, when the fear factor is very high, so I've been told, that is the time that you want to buy. Not to mention the positives that I have about this driver. Number one, I have to say it's the best looking TaylorMade driver I think I've seen for an incredibly long time. Number two, unlike Callaway's Elite forgiving driver, the max version of the QI35, their 10K head, is actually very good for the average golfer, which I've only been able to say over the QI10 Max, which was their first 10K driver, and any generation before that, any beginner or slower club head speed player, I purely just warned them off from TaylorMade altogether. I say go to Titleist, go to Ping, because overall those heads will be more suited for you, not just your tour pro. And then lastly, I feel like they've sorted the face out. I haven't heard any rumors of these cracking anymore. Not since, let's say, the Stealth 2, which is obviously, again, especially when it comes to secondhand market, incredibly important. However, I do feel like that fear is still very much there. And as we're looking at prices here on the right-hand side, these can be some of the cheapest at the moment out of these four drivers. Why? Well, because of the 1 year cycle and the excitement for the QI 4D. Number two, because of the fear factor. Again, just overall with this driver, if Rory can't hit it, how possibly could I? For just like the other drivers where I was saying expense versus what they're going for secondhand, yes, the secondhand price of this driver is lower than some of the others. That being said, everyone wants TaylorMade equipment, meaning that if I show you prices of the QI10 here on the right hand side and what that's currently selling for, it's not that dissimilar from the QI35. And because supply is going to be so high with retailers at the moment, not to mention you could get this in the wrapper, not to mention you can get it in multiple shafts, multiple heads, multiple lofts, I actually think it's quite a safe option going into 2026. And the longer you wait into that season, especially with all the news that we've got coming, it's going to obviously come cheaper. Guys, any questions, sasgolfacademy.com. I'll catch you in the next one.